Hello and welcome to this video tutorial for the Space Combat Kit for Unity, where I'll be showing you how to set up damageable objects in your game. So what we're going to do is start off with an energy projectile gun. Grab this one, drop it in the scene, put it at the origin here. And then we'll create a new game object, call it input, add a custom input generic component, add an input item, and what this allows you to do is get input and to call functions when you press input down, when you release it, and when an axis is changed. So in this case, we're going to make this a mouse button 0, and when we press that mouse button down, we're going to call this weapons triggerable trigger once component. So when we press the mouse button down, we should get this gun firing once. Which is what we've got here. We'll just move the camera in a little bit to see it better. Maybe over here. Control Shift F, line up the camera, and alright, so we've got a gun and it's firing bullets, and what we want to do now is create an object that can be damaged. So let's create a new game object. 3D object cube, reset. We'll drag it out, maybe out to here somewhere. Increase the size so we can see it better. And alright, it's already got a box collider added. So the first component we're going to add is a damage receiver. Now, a damage receiver component needs to be added to every collider that you have for your damageable object. So basically, when a bullet hits a collider, it looks for a damage receiver component on that game object. So every collider needs to have a damage receiver if it represents a damageable object. So we have the damage receiver component, and it's got a bunch of functions here for when it's damaged, when it's healed, on collision, when it's activated, when it's deactivated. So what we're going to do is add now a damageable component. And the damageable component is where the health actually is. So the reason why I have these two components for you is because, as I mentioned before, you might have one damageable object which is damaged, which has different colliders added, each of which receives damage and sends that damage to the one damageable object, this component here. So we need to drag this damageable component into the damageable field in the on the damage receiver component. Drop that in there. And then what happens is that when this damage receiver receives damage or is healed or any of these events here, we'll send it to the damageable component. So all you need to do is drag that damageable into this field here, and all the events are already linked up. So the first thing we need to do is take a look at these settings here. We've got the health type. Now this used to be an enum, but now it's a scriptable object to make it easier for you to add your own values. If it was an enum, you have to go in to the code and change the code to add your values, and you can't reorder the values or it'll break your settings. So that's why I changed it to scriptable objects. And if you go to the health types folder, you've got these health types here, and you can just create a new one just by duplicating Control D. Rename that my health type, and then just go back to your Damageable component and select it here if you want to do that. Or the other thing you can do is right click on the health types folder or anywhere in your project tab and go create health type, and then you can rename it and it'll be saved there. Alright, so we'll make this one a armor damageable, and then it's got a health capacity, maximum health of 100, starting health of 100. It can be damaged, it can be healed. It can be healed after being destroyed, so if it's destroyed but the collider is still there, then that collider can receive healing events and send it to the damageable, which will restore it back to starting conditions. And then you've got the collision relative velocity to damage factor, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is basically when a collision occurs with this damageable item, the collision relative velocity, which you can get from the collision event, the magnitude of that is multiplied by this value to get the damage that is applied to this damageable component. So then we've got a bunch of events here for when the damageable is damaged, when it's healed, when it's destroyed, and when it's restored after being destroyed. So you can add your own functions there. You can add whatever effects you want on the object itself, if it's damaged, or whatever you feel like adding to your game. So what we're going to do, let's just do a demonstration by just deactivating the game object when it's destroyed. So on this onDestroyed event, we we add a function, drag the cube in. We'll just go game object set active and leave that false. So we'll deactivate the game object. So all we need to do now is run the scene and fire the gun, and on the third shot it disappears because we deactivated the game object. That's a little bit of a disappointment. So what we're going to do is add an explosion, and for this I have this detonator component. I've just updated it, so you might not have this exact component here. If that's the case, just let me know and I'll send it to you. Hopefully it'll be on the store very soon. So when this is destroyed, when this damageable is destroyed, instead of just deactivating the game object, we're going to call this detonator's detonate function. So when this detonator's detonate function is called, it goes through two states. It starts detonating, and when it starts detonating, you can spawn a bunch of game objects, prefabs if you like. Then you can set this detonating duration, which is how long it stays in this state of detonating before reaching the detonated state. And when it reaches this state, you can spawn more game objects. And then it stays in that state until you call its reset function, which basically resets the detonator to it resets the detonator, and you can reset other components through the onReset event if you like. And in this section here we have the detonate after lifetime, which if we check that, then when this game object is enabled in the scene, it will start ticking down this lifetime, and after this lifetime goes by, the detonator will go off. Alright, so that's useful for if you've got like a missile that if it just keeps going and going and not hitting anything, you might want it to just blow up, so at least it looks cool. Alright, so we've got these events here for when it starts detonating, when it becomes detonated, and when it's reset. So the first thing we're going to do is when it's detonated, when it's finished, we're going to add an event here to disable the cube, this damageable object, game object, set active false. And we're also going to spawn an explosion when it becomes detonated. So we'll add one spawn object here, click it, go to assets, and you'll find a bunch of explosions here that you can use. We'll use the fireball explosion, and that will go off. That will be created when the detonator finishes becoming detonated. So when we run the scene now, it explodes and disappears. So that's the basics of how to set up a damageable object using the Space Combat Kit. I'll just go into a little bit more detail with this detonator component because it's pretty cool what you can do with it. In this case, what we're going to do is create a big explosion that starts off with 3 small explosions and then goes to one big explosion at the end. So something that you might find on a capital ship or something like that. So let's get rid of this cube. We'll add the battleship. We'll go down and grab the hull here. Most of the ships in this kit come in parts, so you can set up damageable parts on your ships. And in this case, we've just got the hull here. It hasn't got the engines and the command center and all that kind of stuff. But it'll do for this tutorial. Reset this. It's a very big ship. Drag it out here, maybe rotate it side on. Then we'll just line up the camera again. Remember, Control Shift F. Oop, you need to select the camera, Control Shift F. And we've got it lined up with our view here. So let's quickly set up this hull here as a damageable object. As you recall, we need a collider. Create a box collider. It's already set up pretty well here. So we'll go ahead and add a damage receiver. And a damageable. Drag the damageable into the damageable field on the damage receiver. Make that an armor health type. Same as before. And then we're going to add a detonator. And when the damageable is destroyed, we're going to call the detonator's detonate function. Alright, so this is the same as our previous example. And in fact, we're going to go ahead and set up the main explosion first, exactly the same way as we did it before. And in fact, we're going to go and set up the main explosion exactly the same way that we set it up before. So on detonated, you're gonna deactivate this game object. We're also going to, when it becomes detonated, we're going to spawn an object. In this case, we're gonna create a mega explosion, which should fit the size of this ship. And that's pretty much it for the main explosion. So we'll just go ahead and check what that looks like. So we fire a few shots and it blows up with a big explosion. But what we want is 3 small explosions, or a bunch of small explosions, and then a big one at the end. So first thing we're going to do is add a new game object to the Damageable object here. Call it small explosion 1. We'll add a detonator component to this one as well. And we will create a fairly small explosion here. Grab the generic explosion. So when this detonator is called, it will detonate and create this generic explosion. Now we want the first explosion to go off after, actually immediately, after the main detonator is detonated. So we'll put a detonating duration of 0 seconds here. We'll put this small explosion up the front here somewhere. Maybe there. We'll duplicate it, drag it towards the back. Maybe we'll put it in the middle here, facing the camera. Alright, we'll put that one there. We will have this explosion go off maybe 0.75 seconds after the main detonation, after this ship starts blowing up. So the first one will go off immediately, then we've got this one going off after 0.75 seconds. Then we'll add another one. Maybe put it up on the bridge. And that'll go off maybe 1 second after the ship starts blowing up. So we've got one starting immediately, one after 0.75 seconds, one after 1 second. And then what we're going to do is put this detonating duration to 1.5. So that's when the big explosion will go off and the whole ship will disappear. Alright, so we need to add, go down to the, that's interesting, Unity seems to have rearranged my components for me. In any case, we have the detonator going off, the main detonator, and when it goes off on detonating, we want to call all these small explosions. We'll go detonator, detonate, second explosion, detonator, detonate. You'll recall each small explosion has its own delay set up. So you call them all at the start and then they go off when they go off. And then we've got these 3 small explosions. When it begins detonating them, 1.5 seconds after that, the main explosion goes off. So let's see what that looks like. Alright, so there we've got a capital ship explosion happening with this detonator component. Very handy. You can set off all your own effects. You can grab some cool looking stuff off the store or make your own and make it all happen with this component here. So that wraps it up for this tutorial. By now you should have a good idea of how to set up damageable objects, how to set off explosions, and how to set off capital ship explosions in all sorts of different ways. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.